see how this works. This isn't the version of PowerPoint that I made this on, so there might be some little glitches, but I think it's a pleasant enough crowd that you'll bear with me if I make any boo-boos on here. One thing I wanted to start out with, I think, is most of this is going to be talking about index animalium, his magnum opus, what he worked on for 43 years. And we like to shorten that title sometimes to just the abbreviation of the first letters I-A, or since it's Latin, E-A. If you're Australian, you know, the first letter of the alphabet is I base, I, so it'd be I. But I found another use for IA, and I'd like to welcome you to Indexaholics Anonymous October meeting. My name's Neil. Very good. And I'm an indexaholic. It's been 3 days since I've had an index. And I think most of us here, we laugh about this, but I think a lot of us are indexaholics, or else we wouldn't be here. Some of you are shaking your head, but remember, the first phase of working toward admitting your problem is denial. So I termed the group of people that work on indexes, the ones that make lists, as an indexers club. So we're going to talk about Charles Davy Sherburne and the Indexers Club. About his name, it was interesting reading biographies of him. Squire is one that comes up, and Griffin did a bio and said that he didn't think that Squire was a very good term for him because he really didn't live up to being a squire necessarily, but he's also known as Charlie or Sherb. Interestingly, he signed his name C. Davy Sherburne in almost everything that he did. And I think that was because his father was also Charles, and maybe that's one way to discern between the two of them. So when we talk about Sherburne and his indexing, we sort of see him in this pose, and this is what a typical indexer is. Actually, this was taken in 1935. The index was all done. And if you look really closely, there's little speckles on the edge of the pages there. Sort of, that's what you see in dictionaries. So this is really a posed picture. I don't think he was doing any indexing. But this is how we picture Sherburne. But really, this is what an indexer looks like. And let's see what goes on. So what is an indexer or a list maker? Masochist, socially inept, obsessive compulsive. I should say that when I was doing these, and I was thinking about myself, so. But really, I think we are all facilitators. We give order to unordered and chaotic sets of items. The products from our works for librarians and archivists, they're called references and finding aids. And we perform an often thankless service to others at little benefit to ourselves. So what I want to do is go through, as I say, BC, this is before Charles, the leaders, founders, and inspirations possibly for him. Callimachus is the first guy I'll talk about, but before I get to him, you'll notice one inspiration for him that's missing, and that's Benjamin Jackson. And the reason for that is I didn't have a picture of him, but he really probably was the one that was the inspiration for him in doing the Index Animalium. Jackson was the one who did Index Cuensis. And there might be some botanists among you here, so congratulations to that guy, because he was really the one that's got Charles going on his Index Animalium. So Callimachus was a Greek bibliographer, and probably the first one to do a bibliography, and what he did was write down the contents of the Alexandrian library. But he didn't make a backup. And we all know what happened to the Alexandrian library. Next we have Roget. And Roget was a list maker, very famous list maker. He did his thesaurus. This example that we have here, it's hard to read that, but it's one of the first things he did as a child. Actually, the first list he did as a child was he listed all of the family members and when they died. But this was trying to make order of the universe, and he was finding the Latin names for common things that he found around him. So list makers do all sorts of things, including making dictionaries. And Franklin, I stuck him in there because everybody, when I went online, it said Franklin was a consummate list maker. He made lists of everything. And I think maybe the best example for Franklin is the Poor Richard's Almanac, where he synthesized all the data together. Just another type of making a list. Louis Agassiz, and he's, of course, well known for doing the Nomenclator Zoologicus, and also for writing one of the first bibliographies of all of zoology. Elliot Coos. Now, these are selected. There's going to be a lot that I'm missing, and don't feel bad that if one of your favorites is not here. These are some of the ones that just came to the top of my head. Elliot Coos was a ornithological bibliographer, and the reason I put him in there is because he has a nice quote that I used in my bibliography. This is the one that I put in my bibliography. There's an added one in the next one. Bibliography is a necessary nuisance and horrible drudgery that no mere drudge could perform. It takes sort of an inspired idiot to be a good bibliographer. What comes afterwards is really something that hits home. And his inspiration is as dangerous a gift as the appetite of a gambler or dipsomaniac. It grows with what it feeds upon and finally possesses its victim like any other invincible vice. So it's an obsession, it's an addiction. And a lot of the stuff that when I was doing this, I think, wow, this is me. And Samuel Scudder, who did his, I don't know how to go back on this one. Well, I'll just keep on going. There's an arrow, yeah, okay. Yeah, that'll do it. And his Nomenclator Zoologicus also. And that's the last of the ones that are BC. And Richmond, now we're getting into AD, which is after Davies. And he's, of course, famous for doing the card file of all of the ornithology, and I think there's going to be some talk about that. Gregory Matthews, another ornithologist who did the bibliography for the birds of Australia with a lot of dating information in there. And Schultz, who's not too well known, but also did a Nomenclator Zoologicus of all the generic and subgeneric names. He died and other successors took it on, and the series went from 1926 to 1954. And more closer to home, Neve, of course, with his Nomenclator Zoologicus. I'll speak a little more about that later on in the talk. And Bill Eschmeyer, one of my inspirations, did his catalog of fishes and the genera of fishes. And Chris Thompson, who's here in our audience today, started with the Systema Dipterorum, had a different name before that. This is the first publication to come out of that was Kurt Zabrowski's family group names of Diptera, and now being worked on are the generic names and specific names. So let's get on to the early life of our chief protagonist. Here's his mother and father, as Charles William Sherburne, who was an engraver, and I think a lot of the influence that Charles had was from his father being in the engraving business. He got to know all about printing, and some of his, if you've read Squire, you know that he got jobs working with a bookseller, so he understood about books as well, and that helped him throughout his career. And I took a copy of the plate out of Squire, and it's interesting to see some of the things in there. I don't know if any of you have taken a close look at that, but the open book has a full ram in there because he was working on foraminifera early in his career. Shakespeare's there, Darwin's there, the Lamp of Knowledge. And what's interesting, you can't really see it here, but you really look close, that's where his father signed his name to the engraving, so quite nice. Charles was born, not today, 150 years ago, but June 30th, 1861. He was baptized here at St. Luke's in Chelsea, which happens to be where Charles Dickens got married 30 years earlier. Now, he was a rather shy guy, and I tried to find some early photographs of him, and I got really close. Found the maternity ward, but he was missing that day. And I found the classroom, one of his classrooms that he was in, and he was missing that day too. But in midlife, he started showing up with photographs, and here we see the ones, these are taken all out of Squire at age 25 with a dapper-looking young man. In 32, he's got the pipe with smoke coming out of there. That's kind of nice to see that. And age 34 with his hat. And some of that same hat is in some of the cartoons that he does. And later in life, here he is at age 65, and then the one we've seen before at age 74. Now, home life. There was some talk early on in some of the emails that maybe we should honor Sherburne with one of those little blue circular plaques that you see around for where he lived, his home. Well, his home was 49 Peterborough Road, and a colleague of mine, Scott Sherman, had gone there in 1998 to look for Sherburne's home. And here's the picture from Squire of his favorite room, his reading corner with all the books. Sometimes we are comforted by our books. And here's Peterborough Road in the corner. And there's some of the houses that are there. This is in the 70 series, and the reason I show that is because the actual ones where his cousin was in 47, he was in 49, and his sister was in 52, Peterborough Road. These are all now council flats. They were raised, and so all this is where he used to live, so it's going to be pretty hard to unfortunately, to put a blue plaque where his house was. So let's talk about some of the works that Sherburne did. He did bibliographies, catalogs, indexes, and dating. Bibliographies, the first one he did was a bibliography of foraminifera, and that didn't take him very long to do that either. And it's just amazing, every time you read about what he did and the power that he had to get things done so quickly, it just amazes me. And probably because he worked alone, that had a lot to do with it. He didn't have as many distractions. And catalogs right after that, 2 years later, he's got a catalog of the British fossil vertebrates. In indexes, the first index that he made was really an index of the forams in a few parts. And of course, the Index Anomalium in 1902, the first IA. And the second one that went from 1922 to 1933. In dating, that's something that he found was necessary right after he got started. And any of you that are involved in doing bibliographies or even taxonomy, you need to get accurate dates of information. This is one of my passions, is finding dates of publication for things, and Sherburne is another inspiration for me in that. And he started right off the bat. In 1891, he did Pallas's Icones, and a few dozen, maybe, papers or so on dating all through his life. And in 1936, the first publication for the Society of the Bibliography of Natural History was a compilation of works that dealt with dating of works, natural history works, and a synthesis. And then each year, for each volume, there was a supplement that came on after that. And I've been now continuing that, and I just gave Graham a copy of the latest version of continuing this, but just for zoology. So it's up to date to 2011 now. Now some tidbits, some things that Sherburne said or Sherburne's done with bibliographies and indexes. And this is taken also from Squire. The systematist requires certain tools for his work, of which not the least important are good bibliographies and indexes. And he noticed that as soon as he got started with the foraminifera, and to just try make heads or tails of things, you needed to really know not only the taxa that you're working on, but the nomenclature of them, and get the bibliography all straight. When I started in grad school and had a topic that I chose, my major professor said, learn everything you can about the little group that you're studying and get a full bibliography so you have all the literature at hand. And Sherburne did that for not just this, but eventually for all of zoology, which led to the index. And as Graham has said, Sherburne's unending quest for books ended up helping not only build the Library of Natural History Museum, but make it in many cases the only place, or one of a few places, one can find a copy of a rare book on zoology. It is one of the most complete zoological libraries in the world, and Sherburne is a big part of that. So let's do a little timeline on his work on the Index Animalium, and this is the Index Animalium, the first one. It was work began in 1890 and was published in October of 1902. And he did a nice cartoon. On August 9th, this had to be the last slip that he gave to the printer on August, and it was published in October. And when he was done, that was essentially how he felt. If anybody can translate that, I've been trying to get a translation of that, or even find out what language that is. Be glad to find out. Anybody know? No? Leave that mystery for later then. And for Index Animalium 2, I've got conflicting things on this. One, that he actually started working on Index Animalium as soon as he was working on the first, but also, if you read in Squire, you'll see two different things. The other one, he started probably right after the second one was done, and he until this was finished in 1933. The last part was published in July 1933, and the total time spent indexing the names was 43 years. An interesting thing to note about this is he didn't compile all this stuff all the way from 1902 to 1933. Because it was the way it was published in parts, he really stopped in 1922 and did all proofreading from then on. And then when there were omissions, he had some addenda that were published from 1932 to 1933. But 43 years of his life was spent doing this, so it definitely is quite a passion for doing that. Interesting, the rarity of errors comes up all the time, and how thorough he was, and so few errors that are found. In doing 11 years of constant proofreading, during the week he would compile, and on the week ends, he would, on Friday, he would get 16 pages of proofs. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday go through the proofs. Monday, they'd go back to the printer. And that was the way it happened from 1922 all the way up to the end. There are some names omitted, and these are virtually all from works he either didn't see or included subspecies which he tended to ignore. And there was a German Polka who actually published a supplement in 1939 of about 2,000 names that were missed by Sherburne. However, there's one name that was omitted, and it was from a book that he did see, and it's worthy of note. You know, I work on flies, so of course it has to be a fly. And this is from Macquart's Histoire naturelle des insectes diptères, 1934, or 1834. And the species is Lafria limbata. So if we go to the page in the Index Animalium, and we focus in on that little spot right there, we see that it is there. So how could it be missing? Well, let's go to Macquart 1834 and to that page, and we'll see that there and there are the same names, but they're for two different species. Don't believe me? Let's look a little close up here. We got Lafria limbata from South America and a Lafria limbata from France. Now, what the heck do you think could have happened that Index Animalium only had one of those names? Now, I believe, and we'll have to check because I think there may be the actual original slips may still be extant. We can always check on that, but I wasn't able to, in doing this, to check that before the talk, so it's just a hunch. But my hunch is that he did have both of those names on the slips, and they were sent off to the printer dutifully on Friday on Monday, and Friday he would get the proofs back. And the proofs probably looked like this, where there were two Lafria lumbatus. I made that up. It's not the way it looks, but I just made that up. Because that's the way it should have looked. There were 2 species on that page. Well, he's looking at the proofs and he sees 2 species on a page. I got to get rid of that second one. So that might have been what happened in that case. We'll find out. So now we're on to Sherburne and our future. This is anchoring biodiversity information from Sherburne to the 21st century. So what has Sherburne, or how have we evolved from Sherburne? Now let's look at Neve to begin with. The Nomenclator Zoologicus, this is 1939-1940 with supplements up until 1996. And now we have it online. So we're going digital. Eschmeyer, Catalog of Fishes. It's online. It's a wonderful source, by the way, too. The Systema Dipterorum, in print, but also online. One of the best databases out there, too, by golly. So what about Sherburne himself? In the Index Animalium, we're going to have some discussions about that later on. And that's what the Smithsonian's done, and other people are working on getting the Index Animalium to everybody. And one other thing when I was searching on things that are electronic, available, is if you've got an Android, you guys are in luck, because there are 10 books by Sherburne that you can have. You can read ebooks on your Android. So in closing, I like to say that when somebody has done something phenomenal, laid a foundation for the rest of us that we work on, we tend to say we stand on the shoulders of giants. And Sherburne was one of the biggest giants that I know. So here's how he finished his work. This is the last page, 1933, the last part of the Index Animalium. Finis. And that's the end of my talk. Thanks very much. How come I didn't mention a lot of people? That's what I said I was going to offend some people because I didn't include everybody. You included 2 ornithologists. You're taking offense. You don't need to. There's some ornithologists in the crowd. I had to appease to them.
Any other questions or comments?
Apologies, it's a comment, so it's not a question, but on the plaque, I actually have worked a bit on getting a blue plaque. They're about this big and been very nicely minted. But it turns out that what you need is signatures from specialists around the world who agree that this is a person of extraordinary worth. unveil it or something. But and there's also a little bit of a discussion on which of the other residences that might be candidate places for it to go. So please, when the email comes around sometime soon, then please do sign it and say that Sherborne was really a person worthy of international recognition in the world.
Excellent. All right, thanks very much.
Anybody else? Can I just make one final comment myself, and that is, I've become aware, as many of you will have become aware, I think, of just the legacy of our Victorian forebears. And what came to me particularly was from my own perspective as a taxonomist of amphipod crustacea, that Stebbings' work on the Challenger expedition, 3 volumes of the Challenger expedition, Amphipoda, 1888, which in the first volume summarised